Every day, countless cars move across highways and city streets. Most reach their destination, but some never do. When things go wrong, the results can be sudden, violent, and impossible to forget. In this video, we'll revisit 6 real stories of the most horrifying car crashes ever recorded. Volume 2, events where ordinary drives turned into moments of destruction, leaving behind questions, grief, and memories that still disturb to this day. It was June 11th, 1955, in Le Mans, France. Thousands of people from around the world filled the stands for the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the most famous endurance race in motorsport. The field was stacked with legendary teams: Jaguar, Ferrari, Maserati, Porsche, Aston Martin, and Mercedes-Benz. Among Mercedes drivers was 49-year-old Pierre Levegh. He had been an ice hockey and tennis player before turning to racing. In 1952, he gained attention after driving nearly the entire 24-hour race alone, refusing to let his teammate take over. That dedication caught Mercedes' eye. By 1955, they put him behind the wheel of their new 300S LR. The car was fast, made with a lightweight magnesium alloy called Electron, but it lacked advanced brakes like Jaguar's cars, and safety was almost non-existent. Drivers wore no seatbelts, believing it was safer to be thrown clear. Spectators stood just feet from the track with little protection. Levegh was paired with American driver John Fitch. Their rivals included Mike Hawthorne in a Jaguar and Lance Macklin in an Austin Healey. The race began at high speed. On lap 35, Hawthorne, leading in his Jaguar, suddenly cut across to enter the pits. Macklin swerved to avoid him, but veered directly into Levegh's path. At nearly 150 miles per hour, Levegh had no chance to react. His Mercedes struck Macklin's car, launched into the air, and flew over the barrier. The front of Levegh's car smashed into a stairwell, exploding into pieces. Heavy parts like the hood, axle, and engine flew into the crowd. The engine, weighing hundreds of pounds, cut through people with deadly force. The hood tore into the stands. Levegh was thrown from the car and killed instantly. The wreckage only got worse. The rear of the car landed on the embankment, and the fuel tank burst into flames. Because the 300 SLR's body was magnesium, the fire was impossible to put out with water. Rescue workers unknowingly made it worse. For hours, burning debris rained over the crowd. People tried to flee, but had nowhere to run. 2 young boys and their father were killed instantly, while their injured mother clutched one of their bodies in shock. Others collapsed where they stood. Panic spread as debris flew into the stands. Volunteers carried the wounded using stretchers, jackets, even ladders. A priest moved through the chaos, giving last rites. Newspapers were used to cover bodies. In total, 83 people died, and more than 180 were injured. Yet the race continued. Officials feared stopping it would cause gridlock, blocking ambulances from reaching hospitals. On the far side of the track, many spectators were unaware anything had happened. Juan Manuel Fangio, driving just behind Levegh, barely avoided the crash after seeing Levegh raise his hand in warning. He later believed that gesture saved his life. Macklin's car, meanwhile, bounced across the track, striking barriers and killing one more spectator. Macklin survived. By midnight, Mercedes executives decided to withdraw from the race despite leading by 2 laps. They asked Jaguar to do the same, but Jaguar refused. Hawthorne and his teammate Ivor Bieb went on to win. The next day, French newspapers published photos of their champagne celebration, sparking outrage. An investigation blamed the outdated track, built in the 1920s, never designed for cars reaching 180 miles per hour. Safety barriers were minimal, and spectators were too close. After the tragedy, France, Spain, Germany, and Switzerland all banned racing until new safety rules were made. Switzerland's ban lasted for decades. Mercedes left racing entirely until the 1980s. John Fitch devoted his life to road safety, inventing barriers still used today. Pierre Levay was buried in Paris. Macklin's Austin Healey, the car that triggered the crash, was sold years later, eventually fetching more than £800,000 at auction. Though Mercedes still won the 1955 championship, the cost was unimaginable. What happened at Le Mans remains the deadliest accident in motorsport history, and it forced racing to finally face its dangers. It was May 25, 1950, in Chicago, Illinois. Rush hour was winding down, and people were heading home. But that evening commute turned into one of the deadliest public transportation disasters in U.S. history. The Green Hornet streetcar was a newer model in Chicago's transit system. It was sleek, fast, and promoted as the future of city travel. At 6:30 p.m., motorman Paul Manning, 43 years old, was operating one southbound on State Street. Ahead of him, though, was a problem. A viaduct south of 63rd Street had flooded, forcing all streetcars to detour left at 63rd. A flagman, Charles Klein, was stationed at the switch to signal drivers. All day, he had been waving cars safely onto the detour, but when the Green Hornet came through at about 30 to 35 miles per hour, Manning did not slow down. Klein frantically waved his flag, but the streetcar kept moving. Moments later, it hit the switch at full speed. At the same time, Mel Wilson was driving north in a gasoline truck pulling two tankers with nearly 8,000 gallons of fuel. The streetcar slammed into the truck's cab, spinning into a half circle as the truck jackknifed. One tank ruptured, spilling gasoline into the street and into the open windows and doors of the streetcar. Then came the explosion. Flames shot more than 200 feet into the air. Gasoline turned State Street into a wall of fire, engulfing 7 nearby buildings and several parked cars. People inside apartments rushed to escape. Some didn't make it. Inside the streetcar, dozens of passengers rushed toward the back doors, but they jammed. The inward opening design made escape nearly impossible in panic. The conductor, 29-year-old William Liddell, tried to open the doors but was swept up in the crowd and forced out a window. 14-year-old Beverly Clark managed to pull an emergency handle at the center doors, breaking her finger in the process, and a few escaped. Most did not. 33 people died, trapped in the burning car. Only 30 survived. About 50 others were injured. Outside, the fire destroyed the truck, the streetcar, and nearby homes, leaving 150 people homeless. Both Manning and Wilson were killed instantly. Victims were identified through personal items like rings or utility bills, since many bodies were unrecognizable. More than 15,000 people gathered at the scene as firefighters battled the blaze for nearly an hour. 6 separate investigations followed. Questions centered on the faulty door design, Manning's speed, and the ignored flagman's warning. CTA officials admitted the doors were meant to keep riders from falling out while in motion, but in this case, that design became a fatal flaw. By 1955, the CTA paid nearly $900,000 to victims' families. By 1958, streetcars were phased out entirely in Chicago, replaced with buses. New rules restricted fuel trucks in city areas and improved drainage systems where flooding had once forced detours. The Green Hornet disaster remains one of Chicago's most tragic transit accidents. In only seconds, a missed signal and a speeding streetcar cost 33 lives. It was May 12, 1957, in northern Italy. Thousands of people stood along the roads to watch one of the most dangerous races in the world, the Mille Miglia. This was a 1,000-mile open road event that had run for over 30 years, attracting top drivers, the fastest cars, and massive crowds. Among the racers that year was 28-year-old Alfonso de Portago, a Spanish aristocrat known as both skilled and reckless. De Portago was driving a Ferrari with American co-driver Edmund Nelson. He wasn't even supposed to compete. The original driver, Cesare Perdisa, had stepped away after a teammate's fatal crash, and De Portago filled in. 2 years earlier, He had already survived being thrown from his car at 140 kilometers per hour in England, walking away with a broken leg. But this time, survival would not follow. Before the final stage of the race, a photo was taken that later became famous. It showed Deportago kissing actress Lena Christian at the roadside. She was not his wife, but one of many women connected to his playboy lifestyle. Moments later, he climbed back into his Ferrari, heading for what would be his last run. Deportago and Nelson were only 21 miles from the finish when disaster struck. Racing at over 150 miles per hour near Cavriana, the Ferrari's left front tire suddenly burst. Some believe the tire had been weakened by lane reflectors embedded in the road. Others argued Deportago had pushed the tire too far without changing it. The car veered off course, hit a curb, lifted into the air, and slammed into spectators. The Ferrari then landed with such force that both Deportago and Nelson were killed instantly. Their remains were difficult to identify. 9 spectators also died, including 5 children. The youngest victim was only 6 years old. Dozens more were left injured. Italy was shocked. Since the race's start in 1927, 56 people had died, but the 1957 crash stood out. The scale of loss, the number of children, and the connection to Ferrari made it unforgettable. Enzo Ferrari himself was already in mourning. Just 1 year earlier, his 24-year-old son Dino had passed away from illness. Then, in early 1957, top driver Eugenio Castellotti died while training on Ferrari's private track. On the night before Mille Miglia, Ferrari admitted in a speech that he questioned if racing was worth the cost. When news of the Cavriana crash spread, the victory of Piero Taruffi that day was ignored. Headlines only spoke of tragedy. The Vatican's newspaper even compared Enzo Ferrari to a mythical figure who destroyed his own children. Soon after, Ferrari and the tire maker were charged with 11 counts of manslaughter. The case lasted more than 3 years. At first, investigators blamed Ferrari for using unsafe tires, but later reviews concluded that the road reflectors had likely sliced the tire. Ferrari was cleared. Still, Mille Miglia was permanently cancelled, and public road racing was banned in Italy. The 1957 crash had ended an era. Alfonso Deportago once said that uncertainty was what drew adventurers, but on that day, it cost 11 people their lives and ended one of the world's most famous races. It was February 23, 2021, in Los Angeles County, California. Tiger Woods, one of the most well-known athletes in the world, was in town for a 2-day content shoot with Golf Digest and Golf TV. He had just finished hosting the Genesis Invitational and was scheduled to film with celebrities like Jada Pinkett Smith, Dwayne Wade, and David Spade. The day before, he looked upbeat in photos, smiling and giving lessons, though still limited from a recent back surgery. But that morning, everything changed. At around 7:12 a.m., Tiger was driving alone in a 2021 Genesis GV 80 SUV on Hawthorne Boulevard in Rancho Palos Verdes. The road was steep, downhill, and curved sharply. Data from the SUV later showed he was driving between 84 and 87 miles per hour, almost twice the posted limit of 45 miles per hour. As he approached a curve, Tiger lost control. The SUV crossed the median, went into the opposite lane, struck a curb, hit a tree, and rolled several times before stopping on a hillside. The damage to the vehicle was described as major. A nearby resident found the crash and called 911. When deputies and fire crews arrived, Tiger was awake but trapped inside. The front end of the SUV was crushed, though the interior held up. His seatbelt, officials said, likely saved his life. Rescuers used tools to pull him out through the windshield. He was rushed to Harbor UCLA Medical Center for surgery. Doctors reported severe injuries to his right leg, multiple fractures in his tibia and fibula, with bone piercing the skin, along with major ankle and foot damage. Surgeons placed a metal rod in the tibia and used screws and pins for his ankle and foot. Swelling forced doctors to cut into muscle covering to relieve pressure. At one point, amputation was considered. Deputy Carlos Gonzalez, first on scene, called it remarkable that Woods survived. Investigators later determined speed was the cause, noting the SUV struck the tree at about 75 miles per hour. They found no signs of impairment or distraction and declared it an accident, not a criminal case. Tiger's team released a statement the next day confirming the seriousness of his injuries. He later told deputies he had no memory of driving or the crash. On March 16th, nearly 3 weeks later, he was discharged from the hospital and moved to Cedars-Sinai before returning to Florida for long rehab. He later described it as the hardest recovery of his life. For months, updates were rare. Woods first used a wheelchair, then crutches, and eventually walked again. In November 2021, he admitted he could no longer play full-time golf, but might appear in select events. That December, he competed with his 12-year-old son Charlie at the PNC Championship, finishing second. By 2023, lingering pain led to another surgery. In 2024, Tiger said he hurt daily, but was thankful to still have his leg. Today, his appearances are limited, his mobility slowed, but every time he plays, it reflects how close he came to losing it all. It was February 11th, 2021, in Fort Worth, Texas. Just before sunrise, the roads were covered in freezing mist and hidden black ice. Temperatures had stayed below freezing for more than a day and a half, and a winter storm had already coated the area in sleet and freezing rain. Around 6 a.m., drivers heading south on Interstate 35W began their morning commute. They had no idea they were seconds away from one of the deadliest crashes in Texas history. By 6:15 a.m., the chain reaction began. A white pickup truck skidded, followed by a car that spun out. Within moments, vehicle after vehicle lost control, slamming into each other. The pileup stretched nearly 1 mile, involving 135 cars and trucks. The wreck occurred in the southbound toll lanes between Northeast 28th Street and Northside Drive. These lanes are bordered by concrete walls, leaving almost no room to escape once a crash begins. Semi-trucks, weighing tens of thousands of pounds, slid at full speed into smaller vehicles, crushing some beneath them. One truck even came to rest on top of cars. The sound of the wreck was captured on video at 6:20 a.m., metal crunching, glass shattering, and thuds as more vehicles slammed in. 6 people lost their lives, 4 of them trapped inside their cars, while 2 others had stepped outside when they were struck. Another 65 were injured, 36 seriously enough to be hospitalized. Rescuers faced major obstacles. The road was so slick that first responders fell trying to reach victims. Hypothermia was also a danger, with survivors trapped in cars or standing outside in freezing temperatures. Firefighters and EMTs moved car to car, spreading sand, salt, and even kitty litter for traction. Heavy wreckers with cranes had to lift vehicles off people to free them. One driver, Dwight Kern McDaniel, was an EMS worker himself. On his way to work, his Toyota slid on black ice, and he was struck by a semi-truck scraping along the barrier. His car rolled and landed in the northbound lanes. Trapped, he managed to free himself. After every crash, he recalled, there was another scream. Others tried to help too. Ryan Cheney, a crash survivor, broke into a car to rescue a trapped woman, pulling her to safety. But while he tried helping another person, another semi plowed in, and he narrowly survived by diving under a truck. The National Transportation Safety Board later released a 1,000-page report. It revealed the toll lanes had been treated with brine 2 days earlier, but rain may have washed it away. Road checks relied on workers simply driving and noting if their vehicles skidded. By 3 a.m., highway signs warned of ice, but many drivers were already on the road. Police described the scene as like an ice rink. Over 80 police units and 3 wrecking companies responded. A family reunification center was opened, where many waited for news of loved ones. 6 lives were lost, dozens were injured, and countless families were affected. Changes were later made. New sensors, more winter vehicles, and updated training. But for many, those updates came far too late. The Fort Worth pileup remains one of the worst highway disasters in Texas history.